And hello again, boys and girls. Welcome back to the channel. And it's of course your host Marty Startled. Now, the original plan was to do a multiplayer game, record it, and then give you some highlights using this sort of build as Bulgaria or Romania. Alas, I could not get that done because I could not find a game where those nations were free, and the rest were, how do I put it? Two-speed nightmare fuel games, and so I had no choice but really to move on from that. Anyway, so what we're doing is we're going to try and abuse, this time, we're going to try and abuse another mechanic in the game. Of course, we've done all goals already, but this time we want to abuse a different mechanic, which is the anti-tank or entrenchment mechanic that is in the game as well. So, as we were saying, we want to do an anti-tank light tank build. So I've already got our light tank researched. So our next build is of course going to build an anti-tank so we can get those upgraded guns. Next is I believe will be our construction. And then finally our next build will be machine guns. And so the idea will be to make some rather disastrous honks, but we'll see how that works out for us. Of course, I haven't played France in ages, so I won't know how to optimize, but I suppose we'll find out. So what is the plan? So the plan is simple. So we get our cannon anti-tank, because this will give us our basic heavy cannon and basic high velocity cannon. We then continue rushing the anti-tank tree to get a squeeze bore adapter. Now it's unlikely we will get to 1941 in time, or get to this in time to get the new unlocked anti-tank gun, so it's pretty much pointless. What we're really aiming at is getting that squeeze bore adapter and going as far down as possible as we can. Then we're going to go for cheapies. So we also need to research our entrenchment because this unlocks our dozer blade. So once we've unlocked this and that, we can then build our tanks. Now we don't need good tanks, we don't need high variety tanks, but we do need the 1936 tanks, and we'll just make them as garbage as possible and add bulldozers monging it. So now we've researched our 1939 entrenchments. This gives us our dozer blades, so now we no longer need to go in any way, shape or form down here. So with that in mind, we can now build our cancer tanks. So we've got our improved light tank chassis. We're going to put on... I think we're going to put on the light fixed superstructure, the basic high velocity cannon, and the dozer blades. Now, you might be thinking, well, perhaps we should invest in other things, and you are overthinking it. We need it cheap. So the big mistake people make, yeah, this will be the worst tanks you will ever see, but they will have one thing up their sleeve, and that will be their entrenchment, or their ability to entrench, and that is what we will be abusing. So I don't care about speed, I don't care about reliability, I don't care really about cost either. I want the cheapest cheapies I can get a hold of. So 514, pretty acceptable, I can live with that. And then we start mass producing them like they're going out of style. And there we have what will be our early light tank build. So we've got a piercing of 59, we have got an entrenchment of 14, a soft attack of 121, and a hard attack of 218. It will get better if we get enough experience, so that's really the limiting factor. We do have to optimize that, but it is what it is. Commandos, I couldn't care less about commandos, but yeah. See, the build is fine, but it's my allocation of resources. As you can see, I've already got 1k light tanks in reserve. I've already got 3k light tanks in reserve. So my build is fine, it's just that I've overly invested in my light tanks at the expense of basically everything else. So that is, so if we take a look, 38% entrenchment. Now, that's still pretty bad. So initially, the idea or my method to my madness was not as France, but as Bulgaria or Romania. So what generally tends to happen in Bulgaria or Romania, you push in and then you need German tank support, otherwise the Russians counterattack and break you. But if you're Bulgaria and Romania and you make these high entrenchment units, you can hold the line with these anti-tank weapons of mass destruction where the enemy can't push you or the tanks can't push you quick enough or very well enough for and allowing the German tanks to micro without fear of the Romanian front collapsing. Of course, this means you lose that potential offensive capability of Bulgaria or the offensive capability of Romania in terms of good tanks, but because you have so many crap tanks, you can just hold the line with tank killing anti-tank garbage with high entrenchment. And of course, the next question you're going to have is, well, this has got no armor, so how is this going to survive against better tanks? And it comes down to the large entrenchment. Now, if you're Bulgaria and potentially Romania, if you build right, you can have an entrenchment of up to 18, 20 by the time Barbarossa hits, and you can have about 20 divisions, maybe 15 or so divisions of these sort of garbage tanks. But the problem with the French build is it just has that issue of its doctrine. And of course, what you need for this to work is you need as many of these bulldozer anti-tanks as possible in your division. So you need to reduce the amount of motorized you have while keeping a high organization of around the 30 mark. And the way to do this is to go down your doctrines and go down over here to get the mobile infantry that will give you the higher org. But you can see how long that takes. As France, it's almost unachievable. So this is potentially not workable for a France build. But I'll give it a go anyway to see if it would work. Because why not? So it's July time. Let's take a look now at the actual game. Let's turn the AI off. Is that off? Okay, and then let's actually break this down, shall we? So, what we're going to do now is we're going to find Germany's best tanks and get them to attack a point in the line. So what is happening in this battle? Okay, so that was a urban tile. Let's try something else. Everyone orged. Yeah, they're winning this one. Winning this one rather well. Okay, now if I tag switch as France and try and prevent that happening by moving other tanks in, can I stop this? No, I can't. Okay, interesting. Interesting. Let's build up the defensives again. So imagine we had a second line. Let's try this tile. It would struggle to pierce here. So the reason why it's struggling is because its entrenchment is good and it's piercing. Interesting. So if it did break through, it would more or less be ogre, but you could stop it from happening. Let's try again with everything we've got. Okay. Let's try over on this plains tile. Again, we'll focus on the tanks first. Yes, it would win on the plains tile. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. What is this build? Arm of 70. Okay. So really, if this was a fully optimized player, I would have to do a lot more to get my army XP up. Because that's pretty heckin' chunky. Interesting build. So this Germany would fall. No, this France would fall if it against an extremely competent player who really micromanaged. Because their piercing is simply better than my piercing, while their armor is simply better than my piercing. So the question is, can I do it better? Can I optimize this better? The thing with this build is that it will... Once the line breaks, there's no going back. You can see here that we don't have a reserve line. Of course, normally Italy wouldn't join the war, and so we'd have all these troops up north. But unfortunately, we don't have that in the non-multiplayer aspect. You're just going to keep pushing incessantly into my flank. You are. Interesting. So it's July. Let's take a look at our stats. So first we look at our production. We can see we're now behind the production. If all we have to do is close this down. There you go. And now we have our surplus. He says, yeah, our surplus. If you take a look at our production, we are making 20 of these bad boys a day. So we are just inundating the market. The thing that is limiting us is not, in fact, our tanks, but the rest of our equipment, which means we can throw these bad boys out. If we take a look at our stats, we can see we have a entrenchment of 17. I think it was 16 before the engineering 3 upgrade, which will give us hopefully some better combat bonuses. As you can see, we got our piercing up to 70.2, which is just above our piercing for the medium German armor tanks, which, if I'm honest, would actually probably be weaker because normally you don't see a lot of players of 25 org tank divisions. Equally, our soft attack is garbage and our hard attack is okay. So for the time period, equally, our soft attack with our infantry is garbage and our hard attack is garbage as well. The only thing that's really going for infantry is our entrenchment at level 9. So good German infantry will break this force. Now if we turn the AI off and tag Germany, take into account the stats of the German armor, they have got an armor of 75. Wow, that's really good, but a combat width of 40, which is insanity. No one is going to use 42 combat width in multiplayer. So if we actually be a bit more intelligent and build what would normally be an acceptable number, that's probably about it. I don't know what else. Well, I do support artillery in mine, and I would use How on earth did you research logistics company this early? That's, how have you researched all of this early? That's insanity. Oh well, I'm not going to question it too much. Let's go to this again. Let's do this for now. This is something more in line with a meta build. 30 width of that sort of 69 armor, and of course the hard attack of 145 and the soft attack of 313. So this will be pierced by my tanks, but it will lose the soft attack fight. So once our lines are broken, the war is more or less lost. Now, the thing with this is I don't really know how well built this is because it's of course a buffed up AI. What on earth is this? Hey, let's take a look at the research to see how far they got on their tank production. Yeah, I'm going to say yeah, I may have cheated a little bit, but I'm not going to complain too much because that's good. That means I've got a good competitive base. So yeah, they got to medium 1940s, that's expected, and a Vashti armor, which is also to be expected. Turn this off, turn this up, turn this up. So they've got full air superiority, which is going to be highly unlikely, but we're going to really do it as a worst case scenario. Take half these tanks and put them here. And attack. So again, across the river, let's see the stats. Being partially pierced, I've got 317 defense. No, that's a lie. I've got 294 defense. Okay. Okay. Let's tag France. So 2 units did get pushed off. And if you take a look at the casualty sustained in that, casualty sustained, casualty sustained. 160 maybe? 160 tanks lost, potentially. Okay, let's try it again. Tag France. This time acting as if I would be reacting as France to this. Oh no, I'm being pushed. Let me move some troops over. I have to move them back and across the line because I'd be being pinned. I would be being pinned the entire time. Okay, that works. And if I couldn't do that, let's move these back over here. How long would that take to break? So once again, pretending these guys are full entrenchment. How's my entrenchment doing? Almost. And how many of these units did I lose? Quite a lot. Alright, fully entrenched, let's again begin the attack. They've got 4 air superiority, remember that. And they lost that attack. Interesting. Interesting. Alright, let's shift the tanks down and to attack somewhere else. Bear in mind we still have massive air superiority. They're being dealt too quickly. Interesting, I like this. They're breaking it now, I think, because of a couple of bad rolls. But I could reinforce that if I was the Germany player, or the France defense player. Okay, finally. Let's try over here. Weird. Really weird. And let's finish off on that flank here. That's a weird one. And then we'll move the infantry in after. I see, you got to move the infantry in after. Okay. And now we can't pierce this because our tank hasn't come in yet. Okay. So let's break this down, shall we, boys? First, take a look at our tank losses, finally. 4 and 8 tank losses in combat. That is pretty painful. Pretty painful. That's like half your reserve stock if you're pumping them out. So what do I think of the build for France? It is a lot more micro intensive to play with this build. I think you can pull it off. Bear in mind this is expert AI, where the AI is effectively pushed to make the most meterist optimum decisions possible. So it will be hopefully like the equivalent of a top player. The only thing it falls down in is its bad micro. As you can see, a good micro using the tanks first, followed by the infantry, of course, will break a front line, but of course the AI is not very good at this. Now, what do I think of this build? The build has potential to do a lot of damage, but because of France's basic limitations, it cannot really get to that optimum level of OP-ness, so to speak, simply because it's got too many things holding it back. So although it can get to that level of piercing, because again most players aren't going to be able to get to that 60, that's about 70 odd armor unless they go heavy tanks, and they're not going to normally have that massive 30-40 whip divisions by early 1940s. It's going to be your 20 and your 30 whips unless they really go hard into it. and they're not normally going to have that massive air superiority. I think there is a lot of potential. You can see it takes a while for those lines to break, and as long as you micro the units properly and retreat these and push them over there and then retreat them and push them back, it does have the potential to be a rather useful build. However, the big negatives is that it's completely relying on entrenchment and of course using the terrain to its advantage. If the tanks do break through, you are going to lose, and they're just going to keep on right clicking you to death. This is bugged. Oh, it's the army air it's the enemy air superiority. Ah, I see. So if we were to take that down, imagine they had lost the air war. I now have... Oh, I see how that is. Oh, okay, that makes sense. That's it. Marvellous. Marvellous. So it's the air. It's basically entirely dependent on the air. But then again, this fails as well. Still entrenching, but you know it is. So infantry and tank support. Beautiful. Okay, I got it. So gentlemen, that ends it. I'll do some recording, so this will be the stream for the experimentation, and then we'll do a recording of the best bits. Interesting build about entrenchment spam, but interesting point to note is you need air supremacy if you're going to get the most bang for your buck out of it. And of course, as you saw, if you're perhaps playing as the Allies and you lose the initial air war, you're just going to get rolled over as France. And of course, it's probably better as the Axis because of course you'll have the air superiority on the Eastern Front most of the time. It's an interesting build. I still believe the Roach build is probably a safer bet because it requires less investment into the Metropole and is less likely to end the game horribly for your allies if you do in fact decide to hold to the last. But if you can pull it off, it can be a rather disgusting build. Of course, you've got to bear in mind that it's not the most accurate simulation of a multiplayer historical game because you'll still have Italy will normally not join until the fall of France, and so most of the troops you have down south would perhaps be half the number and they would be up north, and of course you would have the Allied air coming in to provide support and stop the incessant bombing. Anyway, that's me done for the day, boys. It is now 9:40 for me. I'm going to go to bed now after I upload the video so I can record it, edit it tomorrow. Tell me what you think about the build. If you think it's garbage, then go ahead and tell me it's garbage and why, preferably why. It's an interesting one, but it's just too... I think the problem with this build is it's too high risk, too low reward, and it's probably just better to roach it. But still, it's quite the meme. I reckon if you popped out a couple of those bad boys and stuck them on a line with high entrenchment, you can make a lot of people cry. Alas, not... I just think the front's too wide. And there's too much resources, and I think because you've got to spread yourself too thin, that generally you're going to get beaten up by the big bad German panzer thrusts. So it's a mixed bag in terms of actual use. So I would call this a high risk, low reward strategy. Probably not worth doing in the grander scheme of things. Anyway, boys and girls, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all later. Adieu.